Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
Hey, we're back. It's America's Workforce. Don't forget we're available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, as well as Spotify. And we ask that you please subscribe to our podcast network. We have various platforms, as I just indicated. And once you get hooked on the show, give us a rating. A 5-star rating would be greatly appreciated. I saw some sad news before the show today. Tommy DeVito, one of the founding members of the Four Seasons, passed away from COVID-19, 92 years of age. And let's go to line number one. Four Seasons was a great band back in the 60s and early 70s, and that spawned a musical called the Jersey Boys. And I always think about this guy when we join him each and every month. He's my Jersey guy, Pete Ielmini of the Heat and Frost Insulators. Pete, how we doing today?
Good. How you doing today?
I knew you'd come back that way. Have you ever seen the Jersey Boys in concert? I have to ask you that. I meant to ask you that a couple of times, and now with the death of Tommy DeVito, it just prompted me to ask you. But did you ever check them out?
Yeah, about 6-7 years ago. It was one of the few times I actually went into New York City and Broadway to see a play, and took my wife, and we had a great time. And it was fun to me to hear all the songs and the history behind Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. It was a good time.
Yeah, it's one of those shows where everybody just feels good coming out, and you just want to start singing all the songs over again. And Frankie Valli, God bless him, he's still alive and kicking, and he's well into his 80s and still performing. Hard to believe, still performing. All right. Today you want to talk about safety in construction, and it's so darn important that we have, number one, laws in place. What's more important, that we enforce those laws and educate members about those laws. So let's kind of go back a little bit. You've been involved with the Heat and Frost Insulators since the 80s, and before that time, we had the formation of OSHA. Talk to me about construction today. I know you've done a lot of research on this. You do a lot of outreach to members. But how are we today with regard to safety compared to, say, prior to OSHA? What's your answer to that, Pete?
Well, the safety has definitely improved immensely. And one thing about union construction, people talk a lot about the wages and the benefits, but you have to realize the formation of unions were developed to satisfy two areas. One, so someone can earn a decent wage and live in the greatest country in the world. And two, to be able to go home every night and enjoy it. And that comes with the safety regulations. As the unions developed strength and grew in numbers from the Industrial Revolution, there was still a need for improving worker safety. And, of course, the unions developed strength through collective bargaining, but the unions still needed more power. And the unions lobbied the federal government throughout the late 60s to develop the Occupational Safety Act of 1970, which is the formation of OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety Administration. And basically what it does in a nutshell, it gives workers a legal right to have safe conditions that had to be supplied by the employer. And not many people realize this, and this is what we had to get the word out, is that the OSHA regulations are set up to aid the worker. The employer is responsible to provide proper safety equipment, proper procedures, proper policies to protect the worker. And because of that, safety has improved. In construction, unfortunately, having deaths on a job site was relatively common back in definitely during the 40s and the 50s, and that has greatly improved. Deaths have reduced from that time period. However, there are still deaths and there are still injuries that are still in existence, and we're trying to eliminate them and decrease them by training our members and training even anybody in constructions about the legal rights workers have when it comes to OSHA regulations.
You know, what concerns me is OSHA strong enough. I'm sure you've heard a couple of horror stories here about, a lot of investigations that have not happened. And then when a company, say something does happen at the workplace, they get a fine of a couple $1,000, $10,000, and you've got people that died. Is that just basically something that Congress needs to do as far as make a fine where they're going to say, okay, we're going to stop doing this? Because if the fine is not strong enough, are they really going to change? What's your feelings on that?
That's a good question. The violation citations from OSHA could be stronger. There is. It doesn't seem to have a big enough impact on the OSHA citations. However, I will say this, and this is where the education comes into play. Believe it or not, the bigger enforcer of the OSHA regulations are insurance companies. Insurance companies for construction companies works the same way as your car insurance, for an example. I use this many times as a parallel. When you get a speeding ticket, the speeding ticket could be anywhere from $50, $100, maybe $150. Not really a steep fine. However, your insurance company is going to take that speeding ticket and increase your insurance rates to be threefold times that amount. And, you could be several $1,000s you're paying for that $100 speeding ticket. What controls a lot of us going down the interstate isn't the fear of getting a ticket. It's the fear of getting a ticket plus an insurance hike. In construction, that's how it works for our contractors. If our contractors get OSHA citations, the insurance company that offers the liability insurance, those rates go up, even to a point where insurance companies will say to the construction company, you know what, sir, ma'am, we're no longer going to insure you because you have too many OSHA citations. Even large projects, when a company puts a bid in to be able to work on that project may have stipulations where the contractor doesn't have any OSHA violations. That alone, with that alone, and the insurance rates that go up, that's a driving force, and that has motivated construction companies to really increase safety. On large projects now, it's very commonplace to have a safety meeting in the morning every single day to remind workers about what they're working with and what's the proper procedures and how to communicate and be able to report unsafe conditions on a job site without the worker to be fear of retributions of being a complainer or a troublemaker. I mean, the safety culture has changed dramatically, even in the last 15 years.
That's interesting what you point out about the insurance companies. I've often said on this show that they're the ones really controlling everything. Maybe they should be in charge of OSHA. That would be a switch. All right, let me ask you this. In your field, mechanical insulators, what are the biggest safety concerns going on right now? And you throw on top of that, we're in the middle of this pandemic. What are those concerns right now, Pete?
Well, obviously with us, it's always been the product that we have to use, and that is insulation. Years ago, it was asbestos. And here's a little known fact that most people don't realize about asbestos. Manufacturers knew that it was dangerous and it caused people to get sick. Maybe all the medical research wasn't available then, but they had definitely knowledge that people that were exposed to asbestos got sick, and they withheld that information from the workers for decades until it all came out in the late 60s, early 70s. And because of that, that was one of the reasons of the formation of OSHA, was the asbestos worker, where the product was being produced and sold and used. Manufacturers knew that it was dangerous, and that information wasn't told to anybody. Well, that formed one of the first OSHA regulations called hazard communication. And I'll fast forward to today. Today, any worker, no matter, regardless of what field you're in, whether it be manufacturing, whether it be in construction, whether it be in the office, every single product that you work with, you have availability to research that by looking at the supply data sheets from the manufacturer. And in those data sheets tell you exactly everything you need to know how to protect yourself from that product. And that was a result of unfortunately, millions of our construction workers who passed away because of exposure from asbestos. Fast going to today's standards, we still use mineral wool, fiberglass, products that get airborne with fibers similar to asbestos, and we're constantly vigilant about protecting our workers' lungs, respiratory systems, and many times we're still working under a paper respirator or even a certified respirator to protect our members from exposure from the common fiberglass that's even used today. And when you throw in the mix of COVID-19, our workers probably were superior to the fact of knowing how to protect our respiratory system. But at the same time, our workers are a little bit susceptible to flus and COVID, which is a concern because sometimes our older members are still suffering the effects from exposure from asbestos. So we still protect ourselves today with the use of respirators.
Yeah, a lot goes into it. And that being said, because of all those safety precautions, what's your answer to someone thinking about going into mechanical insulators? Do you feel comfortable saying, hey, you know what? We've done a lot to protect you. Now's the time to get involved?
Well, I feel 100% safe knowing that the hazards are addressed right up front and they're explained to every worker. And then not only do we explain what the dangers are, then we explain and educate our workers how to protect themselves. And that's a key. People will get hurt, people will get injured, people will get sick based on ignorance, and I mean that respectfully, of not knowing. Being a firefighter, for example, is very dangerous. However, a firefighter is trained immensely on the dangers of fire, how to put the fire out, how to protect themselves, and they're constantly training. And we're the same way in construction. We face these hazards right up front. We educate our members on the dangers of it and how to protect ourselves. And I feel safer doing that by walking into a situation not knowing how to protect myself and not knowing what the hazards are. So I feel very safe.
Very good, very good. Well, Pete, we're going to wrap it up here. We have another guest here from the Heat and Frost Insulators. You know her all too well, Regina Walsh, and I guess she is. Does she work with you as part of the Labor Management Cooperative Trust? She's like the deputy director or something like that. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. She's our deputy director with the LMCT, with the Heat and Frost Insulators, and what a wonderful gal she is. She is a former senator from Missouri. And she has a tremendous amount of knowledge in pushing labor incentives in political environment in her state. And she's helping us to have that impact around the country. And right now she's working 24/7 and working with a special organization called Trade Women Builds Nations, which is an advocate of women that are in construction and dealing with the issues that they have to deal with to be able to work in a male-dominated environment.
All right. Well, we're going to talk to her next. You take care, be safe, and we'll be talking to you next month, okay?
Okay, Flash, you take care now.